Hello, this is Michael from the Audible Local Ledger in Mashpee, Massachusetts, on Thursday, March 26, 2026, reading selective articles from the Provincetown Banner. First article, Get Them Off the Board. Eroding Cape Cod Homes Going to Land Trust, an article by Zane Razak. North Eastham. When Elaine Dahm bought the two-bedroom ranch at 160 Brownell Road in 2013, it felt like she could, quote, touch the stars. The home was perched on a quiet bluff above the Atlantic, tucked into a secluded neighborhood. While a real estate agent had disclosed before the purchase that the parcel sat on shoreline vulnerable to coastal erosion, Dahm figured she'd get 20 years out of the vacation spot and forge memories there with family. She was taken aback by how quickly the bluff receded. Dahm lost feet after every nor'easter. Each time she stood at the sink to wash dishes, she could see more of the ocean. The edge of the bluff inched closer to her Adirondack chairs. Quote, "It was such a special slice of heaven for me, but it became worrisome," end quote, said Dahm of New Jersey. Quote, "I couldn't lose any more land. I loved it so much. I wanted to capture it. I wanted to keep it forever." Cape Cod coastal homeowners like Dahm face increasingly urgent choices as erosion escalates, weighing whether to rebuild, relocate, or give up steadily disappearing land. The Cape Cod Regional Policy Plan of 2025 highlights coastal erosion as a top concern among Cape residents who completed a survey, second only to affordable housing. The Times is taking a deep dive into coastal erosion issues on Cape Cod and Nantucket. What to do with 160 Brownell Road on an eroding bluff? Dahm considered tearing the Brownell Roadhouse down and instead building a small studio pushed closer to the lot line, but a neighbor opposed the plan. Selling it would leave someone else in a similar dilemma, and the home risked tumbling into the ocean. She also didn't want to turn the cottage into a rental, saying, quote, she wanted to cherish it. Instead, she demolished the house and transferred the property over to the Eastham Conservation Foundation in December 2018. Since then, the foundation has let the land slowly return to its natural condition. Quote, "We just leave it alone and watch it go," end quote, said Henry Lynn, president of the Eastham Conservation Foundation, of parcels now under its care. The now empty lot is immediately adjacent to a bungalow at 157 Brownell Road, also at the edge of the retreating cliff. That made national headlines when it was placed on the market. A sale is pending, according to Zillow, after the price dropped to $99,000. More property owners, especially in Wellfleet and Eastham, are choosing to demolish vulnerable houses and donate the parcels to nonprofit conservation groups as shoreline loss accelerates along the Cape Cod National Seashore. For instance, in Wellfleet, a donation off Ocean View Drive is pending. Mark Robinson, executive director of the Cape Cod Conservation Trust, said these transfers of unstable lots take them out of play. Quote, "They will erode away. Some of them are already halfway down the bluff. Some of them may go out to sea," end quote, he said. Quote, "But in the meantime, it's useful to get them off the board and get them into protective status so there's nobody trying to do anything with them in the future and cause more trouble than it's worth," end quote. About 600 private lots, most of them developed, exist within the National Seashore, he said. Although the National Seashore can receive parcels, this process can be cumbersome and expensive, said Robinson. Local land trusts and nonprofit groups are, quote, "suited to make this a more manageable process," end quote, he said. Quote, "I think that's why people have come to us, the land trust community, to facilitate these transfers," end quote, said Robinson. On a recent Wednesday, Lynn visited The .44-acre site at 305 Norset Light Beach Road, about a half-mile south of the former Dom property. The property was transferred to the Eastham Conservation Foundation last October after its three-bedroom home was destroyed in a fire. Some winters in this area can lose 8 to 10 feet of bluff, said Lind. The trees dotting the lot are stubby, Lind noted, their growth hindered by constant wind. Shoreline loss here is driven by an offshore bar, typically a sandbar about a quarter-mile offshore, that trips the waves as they come in. If the offshore bar disappears, then the waves do not break and instead crash directly into the shoreline. Quote, all that energy then goes to the slope, said Lind. The first erosion-driven transfer came in 1984 when a bluffside cottage was eventually relocated and now serves as the town swap shop. About 2 weeks after Dom's conveyance in 2018, the land at Norset Light Beach Road was gifted to the foundation. The two-bedroom 1950s-era bungalow close to the Norset Light was declared unsafe for occupancy by the town and demolished in 2018 due to shoreline erosion. Property owners can usually secure a federal income tax benefit after placing a lot into a nonprofit conservation group. To claim it, the owner needs to have a third-party appraisal of what the parcel was worth at the time of transfer. Today, the Eastham Conservation Foundation also requires sites to be vacant before donated. Once a structure is cleared, the habitat can begin to recover, said Lind. Plants return first, followed by insects and mammals that gradually repopulate the area. Quote, the less chopped up a habitat area is, the better off it is for all inhabitants, end quote, said Lind. Quote, the birds and bees and whatnot prefer something not segmented or divided up, end quote. Losing the bungalow was sad, said Dom, and she lamented the money she lost. But she called donating her parcel to the foundation, quote, the sweetest experience. It was wonderful. It was easy. It filled my heart. It made me happy, she said. Quote, they were so appreciative that I was doing this and that the land was going back to them. Erosion is a process, not a problem, Lind said. And one of the organization's job is education. Quote, we've got to teach people that, yes, it's a dynamic system and it's going to move, end quote. Quote, yes, it's beautiful, but nature bats last, end of article. Next article, final vineyard win 1 blades installed with court decision, an article by Rachel Devaney of the Cape Cod Times USA Today Network. After a reprieve from a U.S. Department of Interior suspension in December, the offshore wind company Vineyard Wind 1 installed the last of its turbine blades on Friday. Quote, with the installation of the final blades, Vineyard Wind completed its offshore construction program. Vineyard Wind continues to deliver power to the New England grid, end quote, said Vineyard Wind spokesman Craig Gilvarg in an email to the Times on Monday. The last shipment of turbine blades for the $4.5 billion Vineyard Wind 1 project headed to the site south of Martha's Vineyard last week. The project had been in danger of stalling when the Trump administration in late December issued a stop work order. U.S. District Court for the District of Massachusetts granted the company a preliminary injunction on January 27th, allowing Vineyard Wind 1 to restart full construction activities in its lease area about 12 miles south of Martha's Vineyard, while a broader legal challenge moves through the court system. The turbines left New Bedford Marine Commerce Terminal on March 10th. On a January 27, 2026, ruling blocked a December 22nd suspension order by the U.S. Department of Interior Bureau of Ocean Energy Management to 5 major East Coast offshore wind projects, including Vineyard Wind. According to the documents filed with the U.S. District Court in January, At the time, the project was 95% finished, with 61 of 62 turbines installed and 44 turbines already commissioned to produce 572 megawatts of the project's 800 megawatt capacity. The company had been looking to finish the project, which began construction in 2022 by March 31st of this year. Vineyard Wind 1 filed a lawsuit and a request for an injunction on January 15th after the BOEM ordered construction pause for at least 90 days while the agency reviewed it and another 4 projects against a classified national security assessment the Department of War submitted in November. The order also affected Revolution Wind, Empire Wind, Sunrise Wind, and Coastal Virginia Offshore Wind Commercial. All 5 were granted injunctions. Revolution Wind, Empire Wind, and Coastal Virginia all received injunctions from the U.S. District Court for the District of Columbia earlier in January. Sunrise Wind was approved February 2nd in the U.S. District Court for the District of Columbia. The Department of the Interior had announced it was suspending construction on the 5 projects in December 25, quote, due to national security risks, end quote, identified by the Department of War in recently completed classified reports. The pause will give the Department of the Interior, along with the Department of War and other relevant government agencies, time to work with the leaseholders and state partners to assess the possibility of mitigating the national security risks posed by these projects, end quote. Unclassified reports from the U.S. government have found that the movement of massive turbine blades and the highly reflective towers create radar interference called clutter, according to a press release issued by the Department of the Interior in December of 2025. The courts found the government did not provide sufficient proof of imminent national security risks. According to legal filings, the federal government can shut down offshore projects for national security reasons, but only temporarily when there's no change in NORAD's readiness status. Next article. Officials ID Cotuit man who died after kayak overturned in Wellfleet. An article by Zine Razak, Cape Cod Times USA Today Network. The 22-year-old man who died after he was pulled from the water in Wellfleet following a 2-hour search on Saturday evening was Nicholas Alvernaz of Cotuit, according to the Cape and Islands District Attorney's Office. Wellfleet Emergency Services learned about a kayaker in distress shortly after 6 p.m. Saturday. A blue kayak had overturned, and the person aboard was wearing a green life jacket and drifting in the current, according to authorities. The Wellfleet Harbormaster deployed 2 boats staffed with Harbormaster and Fire Department personnel, and the Eastham Harbormaster sent a boat to help with the search. Wellfleet police searched the shoreline helped by the Wellfleet Shellfish Warden. The Eastham Police and the Truro Fire Department also aided in the search by using drones, while the U.S. Coast Guard sent a helicopter to search surrounding waters. The kayaker was found in the water at 8:02 p.m. by one of the harbormaster's boats and brought to shore. Life-saving measures were performed as Alvarnaz was taken to the town pier before he was brought to Cape Cod Hospital in critical condition. He was later pronounced dead at the hospital. End of article. Next article. Cape Cod storm cleanup of harbors, trails continues after blizzard. An article by Susan Vaughn of the Cape Cod Times USA Today Network. The late February blizzard that knocked out power for more than 153,000 customers across Cape Cod at the height of the storm left a trail of damage from heavy snow, strong gusty winds, and coastal flooding to homes, businesses, boats, harbors, trees, and bike and pedestrian paths. All towns were left to deal with the cleanup and repairs, including Wellfleet, which was one of the hardest hit by the storm, with 99% of the town without power for most of the week. Quote, "We're still dealing with the cleanup," Wellfleet Public Works Director Jay Norton said on Friday, March 13th, almost 3 weeks after the blizzard began. Quote, "It was one of the biggest storms we've seen." He said all residents survived and no buildings were damaged, but many trees were down, with the most damage in the heavily wooded northeast section of the town near the Truro line. The town harbor also sustained a lot of damage. Norton said it was hard to put a number on the town's cost of repairs, but he did submit a preliminary estimate to the Massachusetts Emergency Management Agency that included salt, sand, town workers, overtime, and subcontractors for plowing that added up to around $100,000. Another major problem during the storm was communications, he said, because cell phone coverage was very difficult that week as trees took down the fiber optic cables that fed Town Hall. Quote, "I'm happy that spring is coming," Norton said, and he hopes the town will be back to normal by summer. At the Wellfleet Marina, Harbor Master Michael Kavanaugh was dealing with many broken pilings. Half of the 30 docks that were out for winter fishing boats were crushed. The damage was not so much from the blizzard, but from the heavy ice buildup in the harbor all winter, he said in a phone call on March 13th. High winds caused the broken and bent pilings that were visible March 16th. Broken pieces from the damaged docks were piled along the pier. The fishing boat docks are on the north side of the harbor, where the storm's high winds hit directly. Kavanaugh said he's working with the town administration to get bids out for the pilings and the pile drivers. He expects the cost for these repairs will be in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. The harbor master's crew is working diligently to repair the broken docks, Kavanaugh said, and he's expecting to have the harbor ready for opening day, May 1st. Other harbors on Cape Cod Bay had also had some problems from the winter ice and storm, Kavanaugh said. Deputy Harbor Master Connor Smith said that some of the docks at Sassuat Harbor had to be reattached after the storm, but there was no significant damage. The landings along Bass River would hit harder, he said. On Nantucket Sound at Winchmere Harbor in Harwich Port, fisherman Bradley Lowe, captain and owner of FW3 Graces, said ice in the harbor was a problem all winter. Shortly after the blizzard, a big chunk of ice hit his boat and pushed the gear locker into a dock, creating 2 holes. The rupture caused carbon monoxide to seep into the boat while it was out to sea. Lowe said he and the crew were feeling sleepy, but fortunately the U.S. Coast Guard boarded the boat at that time for a routine safety check and discovered the problem in time. A Chatham fisherman friend lost his boat that broke free from the dock and sank during the storm, Lowe said. Lowe also owns the Surfside Seafood Market in Orleans, which lost power for 3 days after the storm, and he had to throw out a lot of food that had thawed. Along Cape rail trails, many trees and branches came down during the blizzard. Much of the debris that covered the trails had been pushed to the side of the trails, but not removed. Based on checks of the Cape Cod Rail Trail in Harwich and Nickerson Park and in Brewster. At Nickerson Park on March 11th, the road into the park was clear with a lot of large branches and brush laid along the sides, and the trail was clear for enough people to walk. Chainsaws could be heard deep in the park's woods. Park staff was doing clearing work and cutting hanging limbs, the State Department of Conservation and Recreation said. Barnstable County could not provide total damage costs from the storm, but on February 22nd, it released final data on the efforts of the Multi-Agency Coordination Center, where representatives from Barnstable County, Eversource, AmeriCorps Cape Cod, the State Department of Conservation and Recreation, and the Massachusetts Emergency Management Agency worked side by side throughout the storm with response. 6 regional shelters opened across the region, along with at least 14 local warming centers and charging locations, the county reported, and hundreds of residents sheltered as outages stretched into multiple days. 18 AmeriCorps Cape Cod members supported the shelters and the coordination center. Others staffing the shelters were from American Red Cross staff and volunteers, Medical Reserve Corps volunteers, Cape Cod Disaster and Animal Response Team members, Community Emergency Response Team members from multiple Cape towns, and public health nurses. The International Fund for Animal Welfare provided critical animal care support and supplies for pets and shelters. In addition, 17,000 meals were distributed through Family Table Collaborative with support from local and national food partners. The Cape Cod Regional Transit Authority provided hundreds of rides for transporting residents and pets to shelters and supported the collaborative with meal transportation and deliveries. Eversource deployed approximately 2,000 line crews statewide, with many assigned to Cape Cod, including mutual aid crews from across the Northeast and Canada, the county also reported. Town public works teams cleared secondary roads so line crews could reach blocked neighborhoods. Approximately 200 local, county, and state nonprofit and utility partners joined regional coordination calls twice per day to stay in lockstep, the county report said. County staff stepped outside of their typical roles to support operations at the coordination center, the report noted, along with the contributions that cannot be measured, neighbors who shoveled driveways, residents who checked on someone vulnerable. Quote, these small acts, though often unspoken, create community resilience and strengthen the overall response, the county report said. End of article. Next article, Cape Cod Bridges Environmental Impact Reports Near Finalization, an article by Susan Vaughn, Cape Cod Times USA Today Network. The state's Cape Cod Bridges Replacement Plan is moving ahead on several fronts: environmental, contract bidding, and field work in preparation for the Sagamore Bridge replacement. The State Department of Transportation has filed the final environmental impact statement in compliance with the Massachusetts Environmental Policy Act for the Bridges project. The State Transportation Department announced on March 13th, quote, "We are pleased to reach this important permitting milestone," end quote. Transportation Undersecretary and Highway Administrator Jonathan Gulliver said in a press release, quote, "The Healy-Driscoll administration is advancing environmental permitting, foundation load testing, surveying, and other critical steps needed to deliver this project. Our focus is on moving the work forward as efficiently as possible for the residents, businesses, and visitors who rely on these bridges every day," end quote. The environmental report is now available in the March 11, 2026 edition of the MEPA Environmental Monitor. The MEPA office will accept public comments through April 10th and expects to issue a certificate on the final report on April 17th. In addition, the Bridges project manager, Ann Canaday, said the Bridges Advisory Committee meeting on March 10th that the state is developing the final environmental impact statement for the National Environmental Policy Act, and a draft has been sent to the Federal Highway Administration. A final signature on the statement is expected in June, she said. The required state and national reports are intended to be a complete analysis of how the new Sagamore and Bourne bridges construction will affect air, noise, water, coastal wetlands, marine life, rights-of-way, and historical assets. Public comments on the environmental impact report can be submitted through the MEPA public comment portal by email to Nicholas Moreno at mass.gov or via U.S. mail to Secretary of Energy and Environmental Affairs, Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs, attention MEPA Office, Nicholas Moreno, 100 Cambridge Street, Suite 900, Boston, Mass. 02114. Please reference EEA number 16695 in all correspondence. In other updates at the Bridges Advisory Committee meeting of community stakeholders at Massachusetts Maritime Academy, Bridges project consultant David Anderson reported that a preliminary and final design of the Sagamore Bridge is being completed and the procurement process of choosing contractors is starting. Quote, "We can start construction sooner while designing the bridge," end quote. He said with the design and build process that is now being used for the project. Roadway and structural design has been submitted to the Transportation Department, and the engineering concept will be submitted next, he said. Quote, "We are close to releasing letters of interest," Anderson said to potential project bidders. The interest letters will ask for qualifications, and the potential bidders will be reviewed and narrowed down to a reasonable number by May, and proposals will be looked at in September, he said. The Enbridge company that is working on relocating the natural gas lines under the bridge is projecting that it is ahead of schedule and will provide an update on April 28, Anderson said. Anderson also reported, quote, "a lot of progress on the right-of-way property acquisitions. 13 homes near the Sagamore Bridge will be taken under eminent domain, the eminent domain law for the project, and several deeds have been transferred to the Commonwealth. Field work is currently underway in preparation for the Sagamore Bridge, the first to be replaced." Anderson announced he described the work on the south and north sides of the bridge that included tree removal and foundation load tests. The testing should be done in October, but the testing will not be done for the Bourne Bridge right now, Anderson said. Bourne Select Board member Peter Meyer asked at the meeting if the load testing would have any impact on local roads. Anderson said it should not be huge or disruptive, but noted that some of the heaviest work will be done near the former Christmas tree shop on the south side of the Sagamore Bridge. End of article. A final note, cyclists can take a detour up and around the Canal Service Road May 1st as Geologic, based in Norfolk, has crews on both sides of the Cape Cod Canal taking soil samples as prep work for replacing the aging Sagamore Bridge. End of article. And that's all the time I have for today. Thank you very much for listening, and see you next time. This is Michael signing off from the Audible Local Ledger.